Steve, we're both back from the beach. You look like you got a little bit of sun. I got some on my legs. I forgot to put sunscreen on my legs. Did you get a
That
little?
sucks. I usually I got it in general, but like the ankles, like if you forget about your ankles and you burn your feet, like my feet are always the thing that I always forget. Which now that I say that, I'll still forget it.
My left foot for some reason is burnt, but not my right one. I have no clue why.
Wow, maybe your left was shading your right.
Maybe. Anyways, that's enough about our beach trips. This is the Stuff Summer Says podcast
Steve,
with Steve. Steve, I'm gonna derail us 2 seconds into this podcast. We have some congratulations in order. Friend of the podcast, Ben Jones, and his now fiance Claire getting engaged. Congratulations to them.
woohoo,
Um,
yay!
and then also, somebody's gonna be a grandpa times four now, right?
I saw that on social media somewhere. Yeah, I
I
did.
heard that.
Yeah,
Yeah, congratulations to the Samsel's daughters and their
if it would have
ever
gone a little
expanding
longer, if it would have timed a
families.
little later, I could have just retired and watched grandchildren. But that's probably not going to happen.
Well, now you're gonna be. Well, you don't have to pay for their college, you know.
I
Just
hope not.
so. Anyways, good positive stuff to kick off the summer. What are we gonna talk about today? Well, we put out a survey. This is our bread and butter of a survey. That's what we like to do here. And we got some really thoughtful responses. I want to chat through our responses to the initial question. Then there were also some kick times announced. I updated the countdown on the blog. There are 87 days and 18 hours and 24 minutes, 47 seconds till Penn State and West Virginia play. That will, of course, will change by the time you listen to this. And there was one other thing I wanted to discuss. Oh, it's kick time related, and I think it will be a fascinating conversation because it kind of has spiraled into a fascinating conversation by accident. All right, you ready?
Yes, sir.
Steve, about a month ago, I asked you a simple question. If you could change the outcome of one Penn State football game, which one would it be? That was your writing prompt, your summer writing
Hmm.
prompt, if you will. And we both wrote about it, and then we got some great answers. So let's go through your games, couple of games. Actually, yeah, let's go through your couple of games. We'll go through my couple of games. Then we'll kind of get to everybody else's answers, and we'll go from there. So you picked the Pitt Penn State game in 1988.
Super personal,
Yeah.
non-meaningful game because they ended up that season 5-6 instead of 6-5. At the time, it was like a 49-year unbeaten streak, like non-losing season streak. And I'm a student, right? And I'm covering the team. And I don't know if I'm biased or not, but I'm covering a losing team. And it just seemed like of the games they lost down the end of the season, and they lost several down the end of the season. It was Pitt, right? And I'm that guy that wants Pitt, Penn State all the time. And if they win that game, the non-losing season streak is probably continuing to the early 2000s, right? Like it's pretty an impressive thing for the program. So that just felt like one that hurt the program in a lot of ways. And they didn't have 5-6 talent. They had more than 5-6 talent. So
Well, it's
that's why
only,
it was there for me.
what, 2 years removed from the national championship team. Um, who was the quarterback that year? Was it?
They were switching around. They had some injuries, and like Lance Lonergan was playing a lot because he was the senior late, and that was the problem. Like I think there was some more talent behind him,
Mm,
and they didn't. They stuck Lance out there out of loyalty. But they had, I mean, that wasn't full fledged Gary Brown, Leroy Thompson backfield, but those guys were on the team. I mean, they were just shouldn't have been a 5-16, and the pit loss was a pit loss. So that was mine. And it was kind of off the radar, and I think we both kind of missed a really good game that we'll probably talk about that we should have had
we'll
in
get
recent
there. We'll
years.
get
But that
there.
was
We'll
mine.
get there.
And I know
Patience, grasshopper. I want to pick through a couple of your other games because one game almost made my list. I've written about this before. This is the first Penn State game that I remember, which is Minnesota Penn State in 1999. That one came up relatively often in the comment sections, and people replying to tweets. I thought that one was a good one to call out. The one that I had completely burned down in my brain, and that you gave me PTSD to this weekend, was the Temple Pitt game of 2015.
Oh, it was awful.
Do you think that's the worst loss of James Franklin's career at Penn State? It's either one or two.
Yeah, like because the other two is probably against a team that they maybe could ostensibly lose to in general, not
It,
Temple, right? Like right? Like the two is the Ohio State game or something like that,
Oh,
right?
I would say.
It's not some team that they should beat all the time, right? Which is Temple.
I,
So in this game, go ahead.
I was just saying, I would say it's the Illinois game in
Oh, okay.
2021. That would be
Yeah, okay. The
the
overtime
one.
game. That's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, and I've kind of burned that one out. But I mean, Temple was memorable too. I think we had moved Danny into Nashville that weekend, or we were visiting Nashville that weekend. So I'm kind of listening on the car radio in the parking lot of like a Publix or a Kroger, and then we're at some house watching the game back and forth, and you're just like, they cannot be this bad. Like this is just really bad football. Um, so I think in terms of worst loss, it was just bad football game loss is why that one made the list.
Yeah, that was. I remember the thing that I actually remember about that game the most is that was Labor Day weekend that year. Anna's
Mhm.
parents still lived in New Jersey, so we were gonna go to Asbury Park for the first time, which like for me is a big deal because I'm a big Bruce Springsteen guy, right? And we get there and we walk outside the Stone Pony, and there's this guy collecting tickets at the Stone Pony. He's like, "What the hell happened yesterday?" And that's what all I can think about after that game is not actually the game itself. It's the guy at the Stone Pony going, "What the hell happened yesterday?" Because I think that one was good. Um, on 6-4, Iowa, Penn State 6-4. That one also appeared quite a lot just because a lot of people lost brain cells.
Yeah.
Um, and there's another one as well on your list of candidates, which was the Alabama Penn State in 1979. That one came up. A couple people submitted that one as well.
Are those old people? Yeah. And the interesting thing was we had dinner. I think when Penn State played at Alabama, 15 years ago now, the first
Mm-hmm.
game in that series, we went to dinner at a rib joint, and there was a picture of that thing. Like that was the big thing in the mantle of him Mike Gooman getting stopped at the goal line, and we ate dinner at a big table, and with us was Barry Krause, like the guy who made the stop. Like so, it was just kind of interesting that there was that connection. And I was in 1979 was my wheelhouse for watching Penn State on TV, being a young kid. So, and I think older people probably thought, oh yeah, that's the game you changed because they win a national championship, but it kind of made the one a few years later even more meaningful because it didn't happen.
I thought that was a good line in here. I thought the line of along Route 20 or 322 was a good line. Um, so yeah, all right. Let's go through my picks and then we will
Yep.
discuss a couple of the ones we left off. So my pick was the Michigan Penn State game in 2017. Um, both personal reasons and I think an outcome reason too, right? Like I think there's at least a conspiracy thread or a not a conspiracy thread, but a alternate timeline thread that Penn State probably makes the college football playoff that year. As soon as I kind of put the article out, and this we'll discuss this game, a couple of people had pretty good points that it actually probably should have been the other game that season, the Ohio State loss, because of the way the conference tiebreaker would have worked out, and that probably puts Penn State in a better position to go. I don't know. This is the only game. This is the only game that I have legitimately just walked out of the stadium. Not no taking any pictures afterwards. No standing there. The kick went through and I walked out of Spartan Stadium. And it's the most mad I've ever been after a Penn State loss. So that was my pick.
Well, yeah, and it was just that forever game, right? Like it was just with the weather and the stories and the whatever else. It makes it makes sense, and it's really not. I mean, we talk about these. It's kind of about the outcome of the game, but it's kind of about the memories associated with the game, right? You're at the Stone Pony, and some guy says, "What's up with that?" Right? I'm watching in Nashville. This game, we were in the basement of somebody's house because we were moving. Like we had been living with the dogs with some guy, and we had to go out with walk the dogs and do some stuff around the house for like a couple hours. We come back, they're still playing the game, right? Because there was, and so yeah,
Yeah. No, there was very much a sunk cost fallacy in that one, I think would be the best way to say it. Um, a game that a lot of people put on their list that I think is a fascinating one in the national landscape, and it's something that like we debate all the time at our tailgates is like 2005, and if Lloyd Carr essentially doesn't ask for those 2 seconds back, what
yep,
happens, and then what happens later that year, or I guess into the next year between USC and Texas. Like Penn State's undefeated, they have a legitimate case to be in the national title game. I don't think they beat that. I don't think they beat that USC team by any means. I don't think that they probably beat that Texas team by
mm,
any means, because I think those are two of the best college football teams ever. And I don't know if I could live with changing the outcome. That was why that was a candidate for me
yep.
as well. Um, the other one on this list, and I had a couple Iowa games on this list, but the other one on this list that I had was the Penn State loss to Iowa in 2021. Um, I I don't know. I think there's like this little, and I said it here, but like there's this little like devil on the shoulder of what happens, right? Like what happens if Sean Clifford, if Penn State has a successful season that year? Does Drew Aller start? Like, or is Penn State ahead of schedule? I don't know if they're in a better spot because I think some of that also was just like what we saw scheming wise, what we saw maybe wide receiver wise last year. So I think there's just like a fascinating kind of itch to find out what it was there. Um, Ohio State and Penn State in 2024 or 2014. It's just the lasting image of Akil Lynch just getting blown up by Joey Bosa on the last play. That's really just what I want to change. And then I put both had
That's a good choice.
sentimental
Yeah.
ones. This was like obviously like there's the sentimental reasons personally because that was my first game as a student. There's also the sentimental reason of like this being like the first game after the sanctions and everything, and Penn State losing to Ohio doesn't exactly like look great. Just on the whole grand scheme of things after the sanctions, it's like, and I think they overcame all of that later on.
Well, and I think we talked about this, but it's been a while, so I forget what you said. Leading into that game, that's your first game as a college student, right? So you are a high school senior when all this stuff comes down in November of the year before, right? And maybe you're not, well, maybe you're watching it live. I forget what channel had it that Paterno was fired by the board of trustees live on TV. Like the first, literally the first words out of Sam's mouth when that happened, like she's watching with us at home. Danny was already in college at Pitt, so it was probably a circus for her down there, unfortunately. But Sam's first words out of her mouth is sees the news happens, it processes for a second. She looks around and she's like, are they gonna suck at football when I'm a student there? And I'm like, no, they'll be okay. Like, no, it'll still be wonderful. Like, what were your expect? I'm like, oh, there'll still be memories. You'll still go with your friends.
There it is. There, that's good. That's a good
But what were
dad.
your expectations?
I don't. I don't remember having those thoughts. I don't. I think much like everybody else. Like I don't remember what was good. Like I don't. I didn't know what was gonna happen. Like I remember at the time, even like. Well, okay. Like even like the week that the grand jury report came out, like it didn't really pick up until that next week. And I think it was at that time we all started to realize how serious it was. And it's kind of hard to I mean, I can understand it, but it's kind of a little bit hard worldview perspective as a 17-year-old to understand it then.
Right.
Um,
No, I was impressive that she was making it personal right away. This football team's gonna suck when I'm there, right? Like, really? Is this gonna, and
and I don't remember. I don't recall thinking the football team's going to suck. I just remember thinking. I think the weird thing is like Paterno had been the head coach all of my life. For a lot of other people, all of their life. Now I'm getting like my crack at the experience, the core experience, and like this central figure isn't going to be around. And I think that was more so what I remember like thinking and figuring out. And then I think kind of going into that season, like I think that's probably still is when I'm like the most proud to be a Penn Stater. And I think it's a like I think anybody that moderately cares about Penn State football and was on campus between 20 like 2011, 2012, 2013, like they actually probably got one of the most unique, rich experiences of Penn State football in a lot of ways. More so than most years, maybe the '94 and other national championship years
that's quite
aside.
fun.
So yeah. Um,
So what did people think we screwed up on, or what they share that we
so
missed?
like I said, we got a lot of very thoughtful answers. We got a decent number of submissions, a lot of people in the comments, some people tweeting, some people texting. I kind of went through and pulled the good submissions, and I'm going to post a bunch of these on the blog. The ones that we can post, some of you were very upset. But I think in general, the game that came out the most in the wash is the 2017 Ohio State game. More people are upset about that loss, and I think there's a recency bias to some of that. It's probably also a younger demographic of fans. I think that game comes up the most kind of throughout what we see. 2018 comes up quite a bit. And there was another game that I thought was interesting. Oh, the loss to Oklahoma. And
86,
yeah,
85.
80 after the 85 season.
After the 85 season, yeah.
I think that would have been, I think that would have cemented a lot of people's legacy. Not that it, I think that would have been a big, really cemented the dynasty legacy of Penn State in the 80s. Not that not that they weren't that already in a lot of ways. This person says the Orange Bowl, which is that game. A win in the Orange Bowl for the 1985 season would have been the only national title result of all four of these. In my it's the most definite, is what this person is saying. I can understand the logic there. They go on to say, in 2005, we would not have overcome Texas and USC in the polls, which is, again, what I was kind of getting at. And then they also said my second choice would be the Rose Bowl in 2017. Would have been great to finish a historic year. That game, I was thinking about that game, and that game was interesting because, that game, I guess, and we can stop on that season in particular here for a second, is interesting to me because, I have very fond memories of that game. I remember my friends being very upset about that loss immediately after, but I also can, live with the satisfaction that I got to see one of the best college football games ever played in person that day. I think maybe is probably a top 10 game in the last 30 years, at least, for sure. The other game that you didn't say, I didn't say, and not a lot as many people as I thought would say from that 2016 season is, of course, the loss to Pitt. Do you think it is people's pride in not wanting to give Pitt an ounce of credit? Do you think that people are just like, you know what? I'm over that. I still got a Big Ten title that year. Because, I think in a lot of ways, if Penn State wins that game, they're in the playoff.
I think the Big Ten title clouds it because that's the loss that mattered. Everybody will point to Michigan, and as a Penn State, if you put your Penn State hat fan on, you're not going to trust anybody selecting anything, right? But that's the one that hurt because Michigan, everybody was injured in the linebacker core. It was an uglier looking loss. But it's the loss that you would get the pass for ostensibly from the selection committee, and you won the conference championship. So if you beat Pitt, it's you instead of Washington in the final four teams. Right. So I think it's just overlooked because the championship, you get that championship in 2016. You still get to play, in a good bowl game and all that cool stuff that comes with it. You just don't think about it. But that's the one that kept them out of being in the college football playoff.
I think, I think. For me, that's pretty much where I'm at with it. But I also think, as I was making my list, that was not, I did not act, I thought about that game and considered that game. It was just, I think a lot of the good that came from the 2016 Big Ten title kind of outweighs that. Now, here we are 9 seasons later, still kind of hanging our hats on that in some ways. But I don't know. I think that one was interesting. I still think the 2017 team, in my opinion, is probably the best Penn State football team I've seen, all around Penn State football team I've seen, probably by far. Speaking of that again was our most answered game. This person said if they hold on there, they definitely beat Michigan State the next week, and the future of Penn State and Ohio State is completely different, in my opinion. I think that's a fascinating theory, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I picked that 2014 game. Is what happens if Ohio State doesn't or loses that game to Penn State, right? Then they don't make the playoff. Then they don't go on and win a national title. Who knows? Maybe Penn State and Ohio State are on relatively more level playing fields at this point.
Right. No, that's what makes this whole exercise fun, right? That's what makes college football fun, right? So thanks for everybody who got back and shared some stuff.
Yeah. A couple more here that were pretty good. This person brought up the Michigan game in 2005. This was a pretty sentimental one. I think this was the first game where I was let down based on my own personal conclusions. I had seen tough losses and I had seen some terrible teams just a few years prior to this, but in many of those instances, I probably copied most of my thoughts from my dad. With that 2005 team, I felt I knew enough about college football landscape, season, and that particular squad. I'll develop my own conclusions. Plus, as a 12-year-old in the middle of a divorcing family, I had plenty of angst and self-righteousness that I felt entitled to win. I can't read the second part of their answer because it's a little offensive, but very funny. I'll send it to Steve later. Then this person said 2009, which I had considered putting this game on my list of 2009 against Iowa. Or 2000, yeah, it would have been 2008, I think, actually. I was a junior in high school and stayed in my sister's Paternoville tent for the second half of the week because I was off school for some reason that escapes me now. But this was a heartbreaking disaster. I was painted cold, soaking wet in front of the front row of Beaver Stadium to witness an all-time pitiful performance against an unimpressive Iowa team. I thought that one was good.
Is there a statute of limitations on like somebody who's not eligible for Paternoville being in a tent during the week? Like that, did he or she count as their person in the tent when people came by and
I
checked?
don't know. Well, so back 2009, there were no rules. Like there were no rules. Like you had to
Okay, never
have
mind.
somebody in the tent the whole time, or they would literally take the tent and throw it to the back
Well,
of
that's
the
what I'm
line.
saying. So
Yeah,
was this person in there squatting in that tent, keeping their safety, and
I
they
think
weren't even a
so.
Penn State student?
I think so.
If so, kudos for the solving the problem the right way. Ask
Yeah.
for forgiveness, not permission.
All right, and there is one answer that I want to make fun of on here. I'm sorry to this poor person. Oh, Alexa, stop. I don't know what. Alexa, stop it.
Alexa's going to chime in and make fun of him too. Nice.
Okay. This person said 2023 West Virginia. Well, it's simple. I got married the same day, planned the wedding, bought season tickets, got so excited for a full season, and then had to sell the home opener. Oh, well, at least I'll never forget my wedding anniversary. I don't know why that wasn't a bad game. Maybe they're just that upset that they missed
They're just mad they missed the game. Yeah.
the game. So, anyways, I thought that was good. Thank you to everybody. I'll put a bunch more responses on the blog. Just kind of wrap this little exercise up. But yeah, I thought people gave a lot of good answers, a lot of good opinions here. I feel like there was recency bias, right? Like most of these games here are from within the last, like since the turn of the millennium or
Right.
99. But I think that's fair because I think there are more impactful games within that time period than there were the 20 previous years, aside from like the ones that have been correctly shouted out by people of your generation.
I think it's easier to draw a straight line to getting to the college football playoff, right?
Yes.
With a loss happening or something, right? And I also think with all the stuff that happened in that past time, like people's, senses are just a little more tuned, so yeah. And that's what, again, makes it fun.
There was one fascinating answer, and I specifically phrased the question this way. It wasn't submitted. It was tweeted by Kyle Rossi at me. And he said he would actually change the outcome of a win, which was over Indiana, to a more convincing win in 1994, so that Penn State's like more convincing title hope against Nebraska that season.
Yep, and that was a good answer.
I thought that was a good answer as well. But I was glad somebody picked up and said a win in a non-wedding sense because I think wins that would change.
Right, Cincinnati for us was 81-0. That was our wedding anniversary, right? So that was so we remember that for that. So
that is like I think that's a fascinating game that gets lost in like the history of Penn State football. I feel like that would be a good deep dive game someday. All right, that's it. That's it for that portion of today's program. Let's move on. We got some kick times. We got 2 Penn State kick times. Well, 2.5, I guess would be the best way to say it. And then we got a lot of other Big Ten kick times. I have a couple takeaways from the overall schedule being announced, and that's that 11 p.m. is now a Big Ten spot. Apparently on the Big Ten Network. I know we had talked about it a little bit on a Friday during the weekend of the World Series, but it looks like they're going to have to use that spot earlier in the year when there's more less conference games, and so I think that's interesting. I thought it was interesting that half of the Peacock slots have been already kind of like assigned.
Mhm.
Um, just because now, like, I'm interested to see what four games end up there and how good they are. I think the most intriguing one out of the first bunch was Washington and Washington State. I'm really interested to see if Penn State ends up on Peacock this year as well. That was relatively it, kind of my like immediate schedule thoughts. What are you,
Yeah,
Mr.
and I think a
Thinking?
lot of people reacted to the 11 o'clock, but it's 8 o'clock on the West Coast,
Right,
right? And you've got teams in the West Coast now, and it's certainly going to draw more viewers than replays of whatever else Big Ten Network was going to put on 11 o'clock on a Friday night.
right,
So it makes all the sense in the world. It's and because they're not going to be doing noon games in the West Coast anytime. So you're going to have a couple of those 11s during the season. And honestly, 8 o'clock in Los Angeles is probably a lot better than 8 o'clock in State College in October or November, determined for
oh,
weather and
weather-wise.
whatever else,
Okay.
because they could do some West Coast, they could do a late season West Coast game at night if they wanted to, you know.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I
and
think
it's all TV shows. Like I
yeah.
think we have to get over that. Like they're just putting TV shows out there on the turf.
So I think that was interesting to me. Um, Penn State will kick off. I'm up 1-0 in on this year's
Yeah, I know.
score.
It's okay.
You're gonna keep. We're
I'm
gonna keep
it's a
count.
win for me. It's a win for me because it's a noon game.
Oh, there it is. There it is.
I
Steve's
got
looking
two noon
forward.
games out of the box. We're well on our way to touching the seven we had last season.
Steve is looking forward to the noon games. Um, I'm not surprised by any of that. So I guess we will. That will be a good segue into the 2.5. Why we say we got 2.5 kick times. There was is announcement that the Illinois game, which is homecoming, which I thought would be at noon, is not going to be at noon. It's either going to be at 3:34 or 7:30.
Mhm.
And why that comes into play is Brett McMurphy tweeted this week that NBC's preferred list of games includes both that Illinois game on the 28th and then the Wisconsin game out in Wisconsin on the 26th of October. To me, what's interesting there is like, first off, I think we have to remember everybody kind of jumped the gun and started to like freak out and like this means that the game it's a preferred list. It isn't how they necessarily selected the games. This isn't how necessarily they shook out Brett McMurphy. Not like calling a shot at him, but he was wrong on a couple of those tweets like last season from how it actually shook out. So I think you need to be patient there. But that being said, I think this leads into our conversation a little bit. What game should be the whiteout, Steve?
God, I'd be shocked if it were Illinois. Um, I mean, maybe not shocked, but it just. Although if it ends up, usually you know that before the season begins, right? So
Right.
it's going to be a 2 week window. Not that people, and people can certainly figure it out in 2 weeks and wear something white. It's homecoming. People would be excited by that, and they've gotten off. I didn't pull my spreadsheet up. It's on there in front of me. Like they've gotten off. They were on a run of noon homecoming games for the longest time, and they got
Right.
off it a little bit the past couple of years. Um, I, I think and I know they have a losing record in whiteout games. I think it's Ohio State. Like I just think that you just give that you make it doesn't matter if it's noon. It's white. It's cool. It works.
I so kind of talked about this on Twitter this week because I agree with your thought process there, and I agree with like everybody kind of no there's no at like nobody's saying that like it doesn't really seem like that it's going to be the case that Illinois is going to do the whiteout game. There's no law that says it has to be a night game or can't be a noon game and it can't be this or that. To me, when I think about the whiteout, like yes, it's better at night, but I also think because they either haven't really played the game that much at noon and or haven't won that many games at noon that are
Right.
whiteouts, there's no special memory around it, and I think that is why I'm okay with, as it shakes out, looking like Ohio State probably would be the whiteout. I think I think also, like, you look at the games, like, there's like a kind of a borderline, like, gross, like, money, like, play here. Like, yes, you could make it the Illinois game as the reason to get butts in seats, but to me that's a money play, and I think people will reject that pretty quickly. Like,
But is the difference in the attendance going to be anything bigger because of the whiteout? I mean, Illinois, they've sold the same number of tickets. I mean, maybe there's, I mean, especially if it's homecoming, they're going to sell that out, right?
well, so but that's what I'm saying. Like, you don't need this. You don't need
Right.
the support there. You don't need another reason. Homecoming is usually 100,000 plus game on average, pretty consistently, regardless of the opponent. Um, I don't know. I get very. I think it could be gross. Like, I would be very annoyed if it's the Illinois game because it feels like it's a money grab to highlight this in prime time, and when you look at, like, it's really the opponent that matters more. Um, that impacts the TV ratings, impacts the attendance ratings. Um,
And it matters whose week it is, right? Like when we going back to a couple weeks ago in our thing, and the guy Mike Mulvihill from Fox, like Fox has 5 of the first 7 weeks with the number 1 pick, right?
right.
So it just depends on where it falls that weekend. And there's not a lot. I mean, I don't know what Fox is going to take for Big Noon. Right now, Nebraska Purdue's at noon that weekend, but we don't have a TV listing for it. Ohio State's at Michigan State. You would assume that's the Big Noon game because Wisconsin's at USC, not going to happen at noon. Oregon's at UCLA, not going to happen at noon. So if Fox has first choice that week, Nebraska Purdue is at noon, but that's not a Big Noon game if Ohio State's playing anywhere. And Michigan State, that's early enough that they don't suck. Like if for some reason Michigan State comes out of the box 1-4 or some crazy thing like that, or 0 and whatever,
They're the
you
most
know,
appealing game. Yeah, that's at least an appealing game on that schedule. So I don't know. I did have this other thought that, and it hit me after we did the podcast. I think our last podcast was the one we discussed the Beaver Stadium renovations. This whiteout game is the definitive last chance to break the attendance record, because unless they add on to the stadium, because they're going to
oh,
decrease the stadium size by at least 500 seats is kind of what everybody's kind of, and it's only come close a couple times. I think I've lost track. I think it was a Michigan game now. It was the Nebraska game, but they've gotten really close the last few seasons. Hold on, let me put. I should put
no,
this on the flag.
the Michigan one superseded it because the Nebraska one was like they kind of double counted some people and it hung there for years, and then
Yes.
they have exceeded it in the past couple of seasons. But yeah, it'd
So
be interesting to look at kick times for those games.
so Ohio State. The number one attendance is Ohio State game in 2018. And then last year's Michigan game is number 2, and it's by 43 people is what the difference was.
And then that Michigan game
And
was at
that was a
noon,
noon game. Yes.
right?
So I have to imagine that, why not go for it? You know what I'm saying? Like, why not swing for the fences and try to break the attendance record? Because this is going to be their last shot to do it, probably logistically, unless they're adding a lot more doors, and I don't think they are.
The Ohio State game was 7:30 that season, 2018. Yeah, and I don't know that whiteout drives it as much as Jim Harbaugh drives it, right? Like that
Well,
Michigan game. I
but
mean, I don't know.
the third game on that list is the Iowa game from last season. And there's 26 less people there,
Right. So
so that
it
was a
might be about
whiteout
the
game.
home team.
Yeah,
I mean, if they really
I,
wanted to do it, they could. I mean, and they really should think about that this season, honestly. And they can't pick one of the crappy games at the start of the season because people are just going to buy it, see it as a ploy, right? And say they want to take money. But find one of the games, whatever they theme it wise, and say, this is the last chance to be present for the largest game ever in Beaver
yep,
Stadium history if you show up, because there's not going to be a large one in history next season or the season after or the season after.
right.
Well, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
So I
Yeah.
had that thought. I should put those on the blog. Maybe I'll put those on the blog. The other thing that I need to put on the blog, hopefully, maybe this week, Maybe next week. Steve has the spreadsheet, which is what he's like looking at and giving you all of these numbers and factoids for. He has been curating this since what 2007.
Since the Big Ten Network started, yep.
It's very impressive. I told him that we have to share it with the masses, so we'll put that out. It's got notes. It's got if it was a homecoming game, a whiteout, this, that, anything and everything. So we'll put that on the blog too. That'll be a good resource to have if you're ever trying to look things up. Okay. Did we discuss everything kick time wise there? Do you feel like we got your fill there?
I think so. I got 2 noons. I'm happy. I'm in the clubhouse with 2 noons waiting to see what else happens.
You're sick. You're sick.
I know at least two later ones are going to be 3:30 or later. So that's,
I don't know. I think we have to. I haven't formulated my full opinion on this, but I do think we have to embrace the big noon kickoff. I think we're just going to have to.
If you want to be the best team in the Big Ten, that's
Yeah.
when you're going to play.
At least on the East Coast.
Right.
So, all right, let's wrap it up with old guy, young guy. It was an interesting text from Steve this week. Hold on.
I'm just curious, like when people, and it kind of came up at work today, like, would you trust somebody who's we're going to accelerate this nursing degree and get it to you in 18 months? This isn't exactly that. Would you trust that nurse as much as another one? But like if it's Carl with a K, Carl's car repair with both Ks. If Carl can't spell, are you trusting him to fix your vehicle?
Wow. We have an alliterative name, Steve.
I know, but it's not a forced one, right? Like if it's Christie's Cuts with 2 Ks and she's cutting your hair, unless you really know who she is, you want her putting scissors to your hair.
Here's the thing. No disrespect to the fine businesses in Blair County and Center County. But
here it comes.
Those places, yeah, I tend to avoid them because they just have a reputation of not being as high quality, because usually like there's something about their logos and fonts that it's like they got a cousin that can use an airbrush tool and knows how to like draw those logos. Like
wow, now we're beating up on the whole family. Nice.
Yeah.
I just passed somewhere and I'm like, I mean, I appreciate small business owners, want to support them and whatever else, but like if you're being funny with your name, I just want to know you have the tool I need, or you're doing whatever it is, and I'll trust you if you give me good quality and good service. I don't need the nifty name.
Okay. We'll keep that in mind for any project that we name moving forward.
Exactly. And then next week we'll probably do something something stupid. So yeah, my bad.
No, I think you made a fair point here.
Let us know what you think.
Yes. All right. That was this week's podcast. I know we've got this stuff to put out on the blog that we talked about here tonight. Then we also have Steve with a scorching hot article in my inbox that is I haven't read it, but it involves the word greed. So we will see how that goes.
If it's too hot, you can let it down. I'll do it again. I was in the mood when I wrote it. Maybe you need to save me for myself.
It's called With Steve for a reason.
Okay.
I think it's fine. So we'll put that out this week. Yeah, and I don't know what we'll put out next week. Probably Steve's sheet next week. That'll be our other project for next week. So there was something.
We just did it. Steve's sheet.
Yeah, but it works. We're not forcing anything. It's not like
okay.
I can't even think of. I don't know. Yeah, I can't think of another one. It's only like K's and the C sounds. Like
it is K's and C's and yeah, whatever.
So sorry.
So we're picking on those. Those people are probably not liking us now, along with those people who are hiking up to the top of the west side of the stadium.
So you know. All right. Well, thank you to everybody that took part in our little survey. We'll do another survey probably in July. I think we'll do our Big Ten Media Day one again. Kind of similar one. I think that was pretty well received last year. People enjoyed that. We should like find a way to get trophies or something. We can send them to the beat writers. They can display them in our background on their.
Yeah, that's true.
That's about it. We've got a website. It's called stuffsummersays.com. On that website, there's a section called With
Steve.
5 stars, thumbs up, subscribe. We are so close to 100 subscribers, which I know isn't very many, but we thank each and every single one of you. So please hit subscribe. It's very free. It's always going to be free. So we appreciate that. Um, that's about it. Twitter handles. Mine's at Stuff Summer Says. Steve says.
At Steve Sampson.
Perfect.